Hello again, lovely people, and welcome to Book Chat. Oh, I've forgotten.
For
those of you who don't know what Book Chat is a not monthly roundup, and I just round up what I've read when I feel like I've read enough to do a video. This week's video is less books than I normally talk about, but that's because I have thoughts on all of them, so I thought I would do what will hopefully be a shorter one, but it might still be the same length as the others, because I've got a lot of thoughts, got a lot of thinking. So it's a bit of, I kind of want to say it's a bit of a mixed bag, because there's things I liked, there's things I less liked, but I'm glad I've read all of them because I have thoughts on all of them. This is such a ramble. I'm just going to start. First up, we have Chasing the Stars by Mallory Blackman. This is one of the 10 books that I really set myself that I wanted to read this year. I won this from Penguin Platform. They do monthly giveaways. I will include a link below so that you can potentially also win things from them. It's great. This was sold to me as a fellow in space, and I was signed up. I was ready to adore this book. I did not adore this book. I didn't hate this book. I have mixed feelings on this book. Let's talk about them. As well as being a fellow in space, it's also gender swapped. So you have two first-person narrations that switch chapter by chapter. Olivia, who is our Othello figure, and Nathan, who is our Desdemona figure. Nathan and the people he is with sort of get rescued from a sticky situation by Olivia and her brother Aidan. And then they are coexisting on this spaceship. I won't give you background details on where they're going, why they're going places, stuff like that, because I'll leave that for you. But as you can guess by the fact that it's a retelling of Othello, Olivia and Nathan start a relationship, then obviously suspicion, stuff happens, shenanigans ensue, twists unfold, such as Othello. There are some good things about this book, and there are some things which I think are less good about this book. Good things include Olivia is great. I personally really super duper liked Olivia. I found Olivia really interesting because she spent a lot of time on this spaceship with just her brother, and her adjustment to having to be around people again was very interesting. And I personally I found her quite likeable. I have to say, I was not such a big fan of Nathan. I didn't find Nathan very engaging. There were a lot of moments later on where I actually found myself disliking Nathan quite a lot. So that was kind of a bit awkward because I really liked one of our main narrators and I didn't really like the other main narrator. Another niggle I have with this book is sort of the insta-love element, I believe it is referred to as, whereby two characters meet and instantly are head over heels in love with each other. That kind of happens in this. There are a lot of sexy scenes in this which I just flicked through because I wasn't really rooting for them, so I didn't really care. But this is where I trip up because I can't decide if it's insta-lovey and I just don't really like that, or if Mallory is trying to highlight how unfounded the Othello-Desdemona relationship was. So I don't know if their love in this is a commentary on Othello and on that relationship, or if it is just very insta-lovey. I have read Othello, I did study Othello, it's just been quite a couple of years. Apparently I gave away the book, can't find it, because I really wanted to read it and then read this, but I couldn't do that. So yeah, that whole relationship I wasn't super sold on, which is kind of sometimes a problem when you're reading this, because I feel like it's put to us in a way where we are supposed to be rooting for them as a couple, which if you're not doing it, it makes it more difficult. There are a couple of twists in this. One of them I twigged onto quite quickly, and I feel like the clues are there so that you can do that. It did mean that I found it a bit you know when you know something much sooner than the characters do, and you're like, come on guys, let's all get on the same wavelengths, come catch up with me. So there's an element of that, but there were other twists in this which I did not see coming, which were good. I've been trying to be quite vague, because if you are interested in reading this, I don't want to spoil it for you. Personally, I didn't super love it. I enjoyed reading it, and I did want to know what happened, but I fear I would have liked a bit more world building. I didn't really care for the relationship, and there were just some there's a couple of moments, there's like a very specific moment which I really didn't like, and I can't talk about it because it's a spoiler, but I just didn't like it. That's vague. So, a mixed bag. I would say, based on this, I would quite like to read Noughts and Crosses, because I know that that's the book which everyone, like, raves about, and there is enough, like, enjoyment here for me to want to read that, but I probably will be giving this away. Second up, I want to talk about the book that I enjoyed most out of this whole selection, and that is 1001 Nights by Hanan Al-Sheikh. I loved this so much. I picked it up initially because the cover is gorgeous, and it, like, continues inside, if you can see that. And also, I really like 1001 Nights, Scheherazade, that whole idea of storytelling as power and all that, like, loads of interesting topics always come up when you read that. So I was like, yes, I must read it. I've talked about previously 1000 Nights by E.K. Johnston, and that is like a retelling of the story of, like, Scheherazade. So it focuses on the person, like the character, and her interactions with the king, and it tells, like, that narrative. Whereas this is more like what an actual 1001 Nights translation would be. And I don't know if that's what this is or not. I don't know if she's translated it or made these up, because I've never read, like, a proper translation before, because I am failing. Other than, like, kids' versions. But, this is a lovely way of saying that this is, although it does set up, like, the plot setup of what's happening, each chapter are the stories. So there are stories within stories within stories. So you have the first story she tells, and then in that story the character's like, I will tell you this story, and then the next chapter is that story. So you have all these stories weaving down that are all interconnected somehow through some theme or some character or something. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed reading all of these. There's such a diverse mix of the types of stories that are told. One thing I really liked to do when reading this is to sort of see how, like, the moral develops. So, like, when she starts off telling the stories, she's telling stories which have a moral that the king would be able to really, like, connect to quickly, so that he's hooked and gripped and stuff. Whereas as this goes on, they're sort of, like, used to debate morals. So you have characters who are, like, a group of characters in one of the stories, then each different character tells a different story, and they're sort of debating within themselves, like, is it men that are fickle? Is it women that are fickle? Is it a universal trait? Like, stuff like this. So you have this sort of using the stories to, like, not educate the king, but, you know, like, part of what Scheherazade is doing is she's not just prolonging her life by telling cool stories, she's also trying to get the king to understand that what he's doing is wrong, that killing these women every night is wrong, and the stories are like a vehicle to do that. So I just really enjoyed, like, you know, reading this and seeing how that plays out. As a storyteller, this author was really good. That's such a stupid way of putting it. She writes really well. I really enjoyed reading it. I also really liked, there's sort of like a female empowerment angle of this with the storytelling as well, which I really liked. Suffice to say, I just super duper enjoyed this. I now want to read a bunch more stuff by her. I have, so I'm looking over there because it's over there somewhere. I have I think it's the Penguin Book of International Women's Short Stories. So there's a story by her in it, and so I'm probably going to have to prioritise reading that because I'm super excited to see what else she's written. After that is a book I did not really like. I feel like I've said that a lot in book chats. It's just because I've really been working my way through, like, my boxes of books that have accumulated to reads. So it means I'm reading just, like, such a mix that, of course, there's going to be stuff that I don't really like in it. However, one of those is The Somnambulist, which is a real shame because when I hauled this, I said about how flipping beautiful it is. This is gorgeous. This is not gorgeous. This was less enjoyable. This tells the story of Phoebe, set in, like, Victorian London, and Phoebe has a very strict and religious mother, and her aunt is, she's a singer, she performs in the theatre. So there's, like, these two threads of Phoebe's life. One is very strict and moral and religious, and one is a bit freer and is based around the theatre and stuff. Stuff happens, and Phoebe ends up becoming, like, a companion to this lady who is the wife of this guy called Mr. Samuels. Mr. Samuels is a contentious figure. Phoebe's mother hated him. Phoebe's aunt loved him. But what ensues is this like sort of gothic-y mystery novel. I think my main problem with this was that I was enjoying it initially, and then we sort of just, I felt like, rather than it being like a gothic novel and, you know, there's going to be reveals, there's going to be mysterious things going on, they're not always going to be, like, completely, like, I was going to say socially acceptable. What I'm trying to say is, I felt like I was just having taboo after taboo thrown at me, not for, like, valid plot reasons, but just for shock factor. You know, like, something gets revealed, and it's shocking, it's to do with a taboo, and it's shocking, and then something else gets revealed, and it's another taboo, and then you just get another one. And then when you think you're done, oh wait, here's another one. And I just got tired of it. Because they weren't helping the plot. They weren't making the story better. It was just like, oh, gotta do, look, this shocking thing now. And I was like, I don't care. Just make it a good story. As well as that, there's a moment in this which, spoiler alert, but trigger warning, sexual assault and rape. And I don't really like how it's handled, because it's like the narrative, like when I read what happened, I was like, oh, okay, well this is very much sexual assault and rape right here. But then the narrative doesn't really treat it as such, despite having it been written like that. Like, if she wasn't going to treat it like that, I think she could have written the scene differently so it didn't read like that, but she did. And then we didn't really have... Then, like, the whole narrative is very forgiving on this character, which I don't think is deserved, because as well as that, he doesn't do anything to, like, make him a nice character. He's just horrible. I'm sorry, that's complete spoilers, but, like, there's just a character in this who I just think is horrible, who's treated really sympathetically. And there is, like, a detail which I can see, like, giving due sympathy for that aspect of their life, yes. However, the guy's a dick. And he treats our main character horribly, so I don't understand why we're quite so like, oh, we mustn't bother him. I'm like, bother the shit out of him, he's not a nice man. That's just me. So, bit disappointed that this wasn't as lovely as I expected it to be. However, I YouTubed to see if there were other reviews of this, just because I like to hear other people's thoughts on things I read, and there weren't any. But, Jean Bookish Thoughts and Lilypad both talked about Elijah's Mermaid by S.E. Fox, which has like a green cover that's very similar to this, and they both said that that was really good. So now I don't know if I want to read that, because they both said it was really good, but this hasn't made me want to read anything else she's written, so now I'm not going to prioritise it. But if you're loving this cover, maybe try Elijah's Mermaid instead? Okay, the final book I'm going to talk about is one that I haven't actually technically finished it yet, because I just have a couple of pages left of the epilogue, but I thought I would like use this moment to talk about it anyway. Odd Girls and Twilight Lovers, A History of Lesbian Life in 20th Century America by Lillian Faderman. This has been super interesting. This is obviously non-fiction, and it tells the story of lesbian life in 20th century America. It's so well researched. One thing I really like about this, if you're not someone who reads a lot of non-fiction, it might be a bit heavy going, because it is so chocked full of just facts and stuff. So if that's not something you like really enjoy reading, then I would say maybe don't read this. I really enjoyed that, and I really liked, there's a lot of like, first-hand testimony from people, so I don't know how I know there are bits in this where she says like she spoke one-on-one to people, but there's also others, she's just really researched essentially. So there's a lot of like direct quotes from people who were alive in the times that she's talking about, who are giving like, and so she's quoting them with how they felt about this aspect or that aspect or something. I really enjoyed like the start of this a lot, because it starts in like late 18th century America and talks about like romantic friendships and sort of like the way that especially like middle class women who were able to pursue an education were also more able to engage in what we would term lesbian relationships that they termed romantic friendships, because you're in these institutions full of women and you're independent of men and you've got some financial security, you've got some independence of your own, and those sorts of relationships formed. And then, like, with the rise of sexologists becoming like a thing, the term lesbian came into being, but that was like a medical, like it has like, you know, the medical route of it being assigned to people, and then how that sort of turned into something that then people claimed as an identity, and how that you know, like, developed. I really want to find an equivalent for the UK. If you are familiar with books that are really good for the history of not specifically lesbian relationships, but just LGBT history in the UK, I would super appreciate any recommendations, because I'm trying to just like read a lot more, discover more of our history, that sort of thing. This is not without its flaws. There's probably a lot of flaws which other people picked up on which I haven't. One thing about it that's good is it talks a lot about class difference, specifically class difference between like working class lesbians and then middle class lesbians throughout all these different time periods. I would say that the voices of women of colour could be more prominent in this, because she mentions, for example, like the 1970s, the lesbian feminist movement. She mentions like criticisms that women of colour levelled at that, but she sort of doesn't really delve into them very much, and it kind of feels a little bit like they're dismissed, where in actuality, like, those are some really valid criticisms that kind of I would have liked to have seen explored. I'm really glad I've read this. I found it really interesting. I've probably not taken in everything that's in this, but I feel like it's given me like a more solid base of knowledge than I previously had, and it's been really enjoyable. Those are all the books I wanted to talk about this week. Only 4 books, but I feel like I had quite a lot to unpack with all of them, so I hope that this has been enjoyable. If you've read any of these, I would really like to hear your thoughts, because I think you can tell that I've got some mixed feelings on some. I'm just, like, this has been a roller coaster of a video to film. I hope everything is really good with you. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will see you next week.